For so many people, the Nicene Creed is it. It's the bedrock of Christian faith, a sacred declaration of truth, right? The story we're usually told is one of holy bishops, guided by the divine, who just clarified what the church had always believed. But what if that's not really how it went down?
What if this cornerstone of faith was shaped less by holy inspiration and more by, well, raw political power and the threat of force? The actual history suggests a story that is way more political and honestly far more coercive than the one that usually gets told in Sunday school.
You know, to really understand the creed, you don't start with a theologian. You have to start with an emperor, specifically Constantine. Now, he'd just pulled the Roman Empire back together after a ton of civil war. He looked at the Christian church, which was growing like crazy, and saw it as a perfect glue to hold his empire together. Just one problem: the church was totally at war with itself.
And this quote, it absolutely nails Constantine's motive. He didn't really care about the subtle theological points in the fight between Arius and his bishop. No, he cared that their squabbling was about to rip his brand new unified empire to shreds. He wasn't a philosopher looking for truth. He was a politician demanding order.
And this is the crucial takeaway right here. This super famous church council, it wasn't even called by the church. It was called by the emperor. He paid for everyone's travel. He sat in on the meetings. He literally walked into the room dressed in purple and gold like a heavenly messenger of God. Come on. This wasn't some humble spiritual gathering. It was a state summit. And it was engineered for a political win.
So to get that political win, Constantine pushed for one very specific, very technical word: homoousios. It's a Greek philosophical term, and it means the Son was of the same substance as the Father. Now, why this word? Well, for an emperor, it was perfect. It was clear, it was decisive, there was no wiggle room. You were either on board with it, or you were out. Simple as that.
But here's the kicker. This all-important word, the very heart of this new creed, was a huge problem. First off, it's nowhere in the Bible. And even worse, a church council just a few decades earlier had explicitly condemned it as a heresy. Think about that. The word they chose to define orthodoxy was itself considered unorthodox.
So, how did they get everyone to agree? Well, it wasn't through passionate debate and persuasion. Constantine's message couldn't have been clearer. You either sign the creed with my word in it, or you'll be stripped of your job and banished. In the end, only 2 bishops actually refused. The creed wasn't adopted by consensus. It was adopted by coercion.
Okay, so, did Constantine's power play actually work? Did he get that unity he was after? Not even close. Instead of settling things down, the Council of Nicaea basically lit the fuse on a 50-year theological civil war.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's absolute chaos. A mere decade after Nicaea, Constantine himself does a complete 180 and brings Arius back from exile. He even gets baptized on his deathbed by a bishop who is against the Nicene Creed. Later, another council comes along and officially rejects homoousios as unscriptural, and Athanasius, the supposed hero of the Nicene side, the guy was exiled 5 separate times. This was anything but a settled issue.
So this whole idea that the church just universally and joyfully accepted the Nicene Creed, it's a myth. For a long time, the Nicene position was actually the minority view, and whether it survived or not depended entirely on which emperor was in charge at the moment. So if 50 years of bitter debate didn't make the Nicene Creed the winner, what did? The answer is simple, and it's brutal. Absolute, overwhelming imperial power. The argument didn't end until an emperor decided to end it by force.
In the year 380, the Emperor Theodosius issued something called the Edict of Thessalonica. And just listen to this language: foolish madmen, branded with the ignominious name of heretics. This isn't theology anymore. This is a threat from the state. Theodosius made Nicene Christianity the only legal state-sanctioned religion. Suddenly disagreeing wasn't just a theological mistake, it was a crime.
And the consequences were immediate and severe. If you didn't conform, you couldn't get a government job. You lost the right to make a will or inherit property. Your churches were taken away. Your books were systematically hunted down and burned, basically erasing your side of the argument from history. And you faced exile, or maybe even worse. This was theological policing by the sword.
So let's be crystal clear about this. The Nicene viewpoint became orthodoxy not because it won the debate,
but because it won the backing of the Roman legions. Its victory wasn't theological, it was legislative.
This blending of state power and church dogma, it created a terrible new precedent. It set a pattern of belief, power, and persecution that would cast a very long shadow for centuries to come.
And you can see the chilling progression right here. In 325 AD, the punishment for disagreeing with the state's creed was exile. Fast forward 1,200 years to Michael Servetus in Geneva. The punishment for the exact same crime, questioning the Nicene formula, was being burned at the stake.
You see, once the government claims the right to punish heresy, the door is wide open. The pattern that Constantine and Theodosius set up, define the one true belief, enforce it with laws, and punish anyone who steps out of line, that became the blueprint for 1,000 years of religious violence and coercion.
And all this leaves us with a really fundamental question. When a belief becomes dogma, not because people are convinced, but because they're forced, what happens to the very idea of faith? What gets lost when your conscience is bound not by reason or spirit, but by an emperor's decree? That is the complicated and often violent legacy of the Nicene Creed.